June 6, 1944. 0630 hours. Azure Shore, Sector Swordfish. The first wave of specialized armored fighting vehicles emerged from the landing craft ramp, their bizarre turrets and attachments churning the sea foam. They carried not the main cannon of invasion, but the tools of calculated, mechanical disruption. The invasion troops called them the Hobart's Circus, a collection of engineering oddities named after their commander. They were the key to unlocking the Atlantic Wall, and the defenders would soon have another name for them, the Mechanical Ghosts. The German defensive transformation along the northern coast of the continent had been ongoing for 4 years. Field Marshal Rommel, commanding the sector defenses, reached a definitive conclusion that contradicted years of conventional military doctrine: the Americans and British could not be stopped at sea. They must be stopped on the beach. The mathematics of defense had changed. At the invasion of N, frontal combat had resulted in a bloodbath, but it was a lesson the Allies learned and the Germans perfected. Here, on the coast of Aquitania, Rommel commanded a network of fortifications known as the Western Seawall, stretching for hundreds of miles. It was designed to repel the men of the invading forces, the largest seaborne operation in history, in the critical first hours. His underground command post, feet beneath a bluff overlooking the main landing sector, drafted Directive Number on, "We shall not engage the enemy at long range. We shall allow him to land, and we shall kill him with steel and fire on the tide line, before his armored vehicles can pass the first dune." The defensive network involved over obstacles placed between the high and low water marks, designed to shred the hulls of landing craft and halt the advance of tanks. These included steel hedgehogs, mined wooden ramps, and million anti-personnel and anti-tank mines. German engineers had created concrete casemates with walls up to feet thick, positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. They had learned from 2 years of Allied commando raids and aerial bombardment. They knew about naval gunfire and calculated that their reinforced concrete could withstand anything short of a direct hit from the heaviest naval shells. They knew about infantry tactics and calculated that the deep minefields could not be cleared quickly enough to sustain a landing force. The German military had essentially created what military engineers considered the most sophisticated linear defensive network of World War. Soldiers were scattered across this sector, ready to meet the invasion. They had calculated for every Allied weapon except one, a collection of armored vehicles that could the entire defensive line in minutes. The weapon that would break the Western Seawall had been born from desperation after the costly raid, months earlier. The solution came not through conventional firepower, but through collaboration between the British armies and specialized industrial designers. According to official War Department records, teams at a secret depot in southern England began converting battle-damaged Crusader and Churchill tanks into specialized mine-clearing and obstacle-breaching machines. The technical designation was Armored-Vehicle-Royal-Engineers, developed specifically for the opening minutes of a cross-channel assault. The technical specifications documented in of records revealed the revolutionary nature of the weapon platform. The main gun was replaced with a petard mortar, nicknamed a massive demolition charge designed to instantly neutralize concrete strong points. More crucially, the front of the tanks was modified to accept a series of unique attachments. The most decisive of these was the flail, a rotating cylinder with heavy chains that could spin at, systematically detonating mines ahead of the vehicle. Initial tests at the inlet demonstrated that they could clear through a dense minefield at the pace of a slow walk, all while maintaining complete crew protection. But they also carried systems to overcome the vertical concrete obstacles. The fascine, a massive bundle of wooden poles strapped to the front, could be dropped into anti-tank ditches, creating an immediate crossing platform. The bobbins, rolls of reinforced matting, could be laid across soft sand to prevent follow-on vehicles from bogging down. The psychological and physical mathematics of the German defense were instantly shattered. German doctrine had only one paragraph dedicated to mine clearing, assuming conventional infantry with probes and hand tools that limited the pace of attack to a few feet per hour. The Mechanical Ghosts carried vastly more explosives and could sustain a clearing operation for hours, neutralizing hundreds of mines per minute. They had created what Allied engineers called the calculated to breach the concrete positions through systematic, mechanical means. The German defenders had not anticipated a main battle tank that could neutralize obstacles faster than they could be laid. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. June 6, 1944, D-Day, hours. The initial combat deployment of the Hobart Circus occurred simultaneously across 5 key landing sectors, codenamed. While the mechanical devices were successfully clearing the mines and obstacles, a separate, more devastating effect was unfolding in the German High Command: strategic paralysis. The success of the invasion was predicated on neutralizing the German and the critical strategic reserves positioned well north of the actual landings. The Allies had developed Operation, a deception campaign of unprecedented scale. It involved a Phantom Army Group, the Royal Reserve Force, comprised entirely of inflatable tanks, dummy landing craft, fake radio traffic, and double agents feeding false intelligence. The goal: to convince the German High Command that the main, decisive landing would occur further north, at the Strait of. Radio intercepts decoded by the Allied intelligence section documented the German High Command's absolute conviction in this phantom threat. June 6, 10:30. Field Marshal Rommel's successor, since Rommel was elsewhere, away from the front line, upon receiving initial beachhead reports, immediately requested the release of the 2 critical reserve divisions. The response, authorized by the Supreme Commander, was a stark refusal. The Normandy landings are to draw off our reserves. The main invasion is coming at. This represented a complete for the Germans. At a minimum, the mechanized divisions would need hours to redeploy south, time the Allies would use to solidify the beachhead. The German defensive manual captured after the battle had dedicated hundreds of pages to fighting a land battle after a landing, but it had no countermeasure for the enemy controlling the very information environment of the High Command. The deception had worked perfectly. The German command believed their eyes and ears, the massive surge of fake radio traffic in the Phantom Fleet, over the desperate reports from the beaches. The mechanical ghosts were clearing the way on the sand, but the psychological ghost army was paralyzing the German command miles away. The German forces that could have pushed the Allies back into the sea were instead waiting for an invasion that would never arrive. June 6, 1944, hours. The direct, physical effect of the Hobart Circus was immediate and brutal. According to the wide lanes cleared by the Crab allowed follow-on infantry to bypass with minimal casualties. Traditional assault tactics would have required extensive losses just to clear the obstacles by hand. The specialized armor was doing the work of hundreds of engineer squads. One report from the documented the neutralizing of over in the first 4 hours of the invasion in the Gold Sector alone. Friendly casualties for the breaching units were minimal, mostly limited to anti-tank gunfire and shelling, not the mines they were designed to defeat. This represented a complete reversal of expected casualty ratios for beach assault warfare. The operational doctrine for the crews, documented in, followed a systematic pattern: advance to the high water mark, suppress visible machine gun nests with conventional fire, engage the first line of obstacles with the flail for drop the fascine into the tank ditch, and then use the mortar to neutralize any concrete casemates that survived the initial naval bombardment. Secondary charges were often used to create multiple blast effects, allowing the burning wreckage and dust to screen the advance of the next wave of troops. German defensive reports, eventually captured and translated, documented their utter shock. They had extensive training against infantry assault but were unprepared for this mechanical, systematic destruction of their obstacles. Radio intercepts from the German documented the collapse, request immediate countermeasures for enemy tracked demolition vehicles. The shore obstacles are being systematically destroyed. Another, later message read, our prepared defenses are collapsing rapidly. Cannot maintain fire control against armored fire support vehicles. The German commanders realized their years of preparation were being by specialized armor they had entirely underestimated. The psychological impact began to exceed the physical destruction. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The subsequent hours saw a desperate attempt by German forces to counter the mechanical breaching tanks, mirroring the frantic efforts to stop the flamethrower tanks at Iwo Jima. Colonel Dietrich Kramer, commanding a mixed armor near the, attempted to mobilize his limited mobile reserve against the advancing Allied armor. The engagement on the flanks of the beachhead lasted barely an hour. 3 units were destroyed by conventional Allied tank fire while attempting to maneuver into position, unable to penetrate the heavier armor of the or break the formation of supporting tanks. Kramer himself, according to documents recovered after the war, died attempting to coordinate an infantry attack that was instantly suppressed by machine gun and mortar fire. The crews, meanwhile, had quickly evolved their tactics. They began operating in combined hunter-killer pairs, 1 tank for mine clearance, and 1 equipped with the Petard 4 direct casemate reduction, all covered by a standard for anti-armor defense. They developed the measured, deliberately using the Petard mortar's high-trajectory arc to drop demolition charges onto the roofs of hidden firing trenches and command posts, causing structural collapse rather than trying to penetrate the thick frontal concrete. Further inland, the German High Command continued. Despite mounting evidence from the beaches, the 2 critical Panzer divisions remained stubbornly in the Ghost Army deception was maintained with constant, high-volume radio traffic and aerial surveillance reports. Field reports from the actual zone, describing the scale of the landing, were dismissed as by the intelligence section fixated on the northern threat. The Germans had designed their defense to withstand everything the Allies could throw at them on the beaches, but they had no defense against complete command uncertainty and the mechanical negation of their obstacles. The failure to deploy the strategic reserve in the first hours meant the Germans lost their only window of opportunity to drive the invaders back into the sea. June 7, 1944. With the coastal defenses systematically breached by the strategic reserves held in place by operation, the Allies began the push inland. The specialized tanks continued to prove their worth in the Bocage country and against the interior defenses. German military assessments, documented in post-war interrogations by the Allied Commission, acknowledged that the mechanical breaching vehicles had of layered beach obstacles in fortified positions. Marine intelligence reports noted that defenders were abandoning prepared positions further inland before they even arrived, a psychological collapse unprecedented on the Western Front. Commanding a regiment of the, documented in his operations order, conventional reduction of village strong points estimated at casualties. The teams will execute preparatory reduction before the infantry advance. The systematic reduction proceeded village by village. Multiple bunkers were found completely abandoned, often with supplies intact. The ultimate mechanical innovation for the interior came with the widespread use of the crocodile, the true equivalent of the. While German positions were built to withstand bullets and shells, they were not designed to withstand that could reach. Chemical warfare documentation detailed the multiple lethal mechanisms when the high-pressure streams of burning fuel entered confined spaces. The resulting heat, instant oxygen depletion, and carbon monoxide concentrations created unsalvageable conditions in pillboxes and cellars. The taken by Trent's regiment represented an unprecedented number of surrenders compared to previous engagements. Post-war interrogations revealed many surrendered specifically to avoid the inflicted by the crocodile tanks, which they termed the. The psychological impact of these specialized vehicles confirmed the Allied belief that technological superiority could break even the most determined defense. The culmination of the mechanical breaches and the strategic deception led to a complete breakdown of the German. The psychological impact created what marine intelligence reports termed cascade collapse in morale. For the first time on the Western Front, significant numbers of German soldiers chose surrender over certain death, particularly when facing the mechanical ingenuity of the specialized armor. General, commanding the remnants of the, transmitted his final operational message on the afternoon of before his command post was neutralized. The message, intercepted by Allied radio intelligence, confirmed the decisive impact of the technological innovations. Enemy mechanical breaching vehicles and flame units have negated our entire coastal defense line. Positions requiring months to construct are destroyed in minutes. Our spirit cannot overcome their specialized technology. This message confirmed the Allied assessment: the invasion was a success not just because of the naval bombardment, but because of the The prisoners taken in the first hours represented a massive, unprecedented surrender rate compared to the brutal. Post-war testimony from the few German survivors revealed the full extent of the terror these weapons inspired. One captured providing testimony stated that soldiers who had faced heavy artillery fire courageously now fled from the sight of the tanks. The weapons created a form of defeat that contradicted their concepts of fortified defense and holding the line. The immediate application of the lessons learned on was swift. The Allies immediately began mass-producing the Crocodile for use in the subsequent advances through and the. Planners for the later campaigns requested massive numbers of specialized tanks, based entirely on the demonstration that static defenses could be. The German High Command, in their post-war interrogations, conceded that the mechanical breaching vehicles, coupled with the operation deception, had fundamentally rendered their entire Western /seawall /strategy /null and /void. The innovations of the Crocodile influenced military development for decades. Official military histories trace a direct lineage from these specialized tanks to modern combat engineer vehicles and mine-clearing systems used in conflicts from the Persian Gulf to Afghanistan. The fundamental principle, using specialized, protected vehicles remains relevant to modern combat doctrine for breaching operations. Commander of the, noted in his private memoirs, was worth in terms of their ability to neutralize the German fortifications. They saved hundreds of thousands of lives. The development of the specialized breaching tank was one of the most significant American and British technical innovations in the. At the beaches of, these weapons proved decisive in reducing German fortifications that would have cost the Allies using conventional frontal assault tactics. While the specialized tanks reduced Allied casualties, they created unique moral challenges documented in military chaplain reports. Tank crews struggled with the nature of the weapon, even while recognizing its terrible necessity. Captured German documents and post-war testimony revealed the complete inadequacy of their preparations for a mechanized /demolition /assault. They had extensive experience with anti-tank guns, but had not anticipated vehicle-mounted weapons with massive in-crew protection. The breaching operation demonstrated that technological innovation, multiplied by industrial /capacity and paired with strategic /deception, could overcome the of a desperate enemy. The defenders discovered that, and that their strategic response meant nothing when their high command was fighting in the north. The combination of the and the transformed the nature of invasion warfare. The ultimate failure of the was not a failure of courage, but a failure of industrial /arithmetic. The deployment of the specialized in tanks represented a massive industrial effort far beyond the weapons themselves. Documentation shows that the operation required a daily delivery of thousands of tons of specialized materials, high-grade steel for the chains, napalm components for the flamethrowers, and enough high-explosive charges for the mortars to sustain continuous demolition. The entire supply chain, from the chemical plants producing the thickened fuel mixture to the forward resupply points on the newly secured beaches, demonstrated an Allied /industrial capacity that the forces, then reeling from years of strategic bombing, could not match. While German engineers could fabricate a strong concrete bunker, they lacked the capacity to mass-produce the highly specialized, protected mechanical tools needed to counter their own defenses. Medical records documented the unique casualties created by the flame weapons. Burns, smoke inhalation, and carbon monoxide poisoning required specialized treatment. The hospital ship reported treating both Allied and burn casualties, though soldiers initially resisted treatment, believing they had dishonored themselves by surviving a fiery defeat. Representatives permitted to inspect facilities documented that captured soldiers expressed a particular fear of the Crocodile and the vehicles. This fear contributed to the unprecedented number of surrenders compared to earlier battles on the ability to project immense mechanical and chemical power onto the beachhead was the ultimate expression of the Allies' technological and industrial superiority. The use of the specialized breaching tanks and flamethrowers, while tactically decisive, created unique documented in Allied military chaplain reports. Infantrymen and engineers often struggled with the nature of the weapons, even as they acknowledged their necessity in saving their own lives. Chaplains reported increased requests for counseling from the specialized armor crews compared to other armored units. The intimate / devastating / nature of the demolition and flame warfare, visual and auditory awareness of the immediate enemy casualties, created unique psychological burdens. Military legal reviews conducted during and after the war confirmed the legality of the IN weapons under international law. The specialized and the flamethrowers were not specifically prohibited by the OR conventions. Their use against was considered a legitimate response under the laws of war as understood in. Post-war did not prosecute the use of these specialized engineering weapons by either side. They were considered a legitimate response to the massive / complex / German / fortifications that could not be effectively reduced by other means without excessive Allied casualties. The perspective, documented through post-war testimony, revealed the profound psychological defeat that preceded the physical one. Forces that had been prepared to die in conventional combat found themselves. This complete breakdown of the warrior code in the face of insurmountable technology proved to be the invasion succeeded because the Allies had found the technological / key to the psychological / key to their defense doctrine. June 11, 1944. The beachhead was secure. While the initial invasion was complete, the tactical lessons of the IN operation were immediately applied to the broader campaign. Directed the continued production and deployment of specialized armor, recognizing that the battle for the IN the subsequent push across the would require similar mechanical ingenuity to defeat entrenched positions. The official casualty figures paint the final picture. Of the estimated in the overall invasion sector, were killed or wounded in the first week, and were taken prisoner. Suffered approximately killed and wounded. The estimated that without the specialized breaching and demolition capability of the IN tanks, coupled with the success of the deception, the Allied casualty figures could have been 3 to /4 times higher. The invasion represented more than a successful landing. It demonstrated how industrial capacity, technological development, and could fundamentally alter combat dynamics. The who clung to their bunkers and defenses found themselves facing a technology that their careful preparations, based on traditional combat expectations, proved worthless against a concentrated, mechanized assault. They were able to land and stay because they were systematically defeated by the battle for the coast ended not in a brutal stalemate, but in a decisive demonstration of the industrial age of warfare. The also permanently altered strategic intelligence doctrine. It became the model for subsequent deception operations and highlighted the critical necessity of modern military planners now operate under the explicit understanding that information warfare is as critical as firepower. The experience demonstrated that the High Command's decision-making process is the ultimate priority target. They made rational decisions when faced with a technology that rendered their fortifications into death traps. Their careful preparation, based on, proved to save thousands of lives by avoiding the casualties that a conventional, obstacle-by-obstacle frontal assault would have required. They also inflicted a form of defeat that permanently altered the military's view of technological power. This duality, salvation for one side, horror and paralysis for the other, defines the legacy of the Hobart's / circus. Military historians recognize the specialized tanks in the deception campaign as decisive innovations that dramatically reduced the projected casualty count and fundamentally. The invasion proved the fundamental truth of industrial age warfare. The defenders discovered that courage could not stop liquid fire, that determination meant nothing when specialized chains could simply sweep aside 10 million mines, and that their defensive strategy was useless when their entire high command was paralyzed by The transformation of defense was complete, from faith in fixed fortifications to the recognition that technology / could / negate / any / positional / advantage. The final arithmetic of modern war was clear: industrial / capacity / multiplied / by / technological / innovation / equals / victory, regardless of the human courage on the other side of the equation. They landed successfully because the of steel used to construct the IN tanks, coupled with the of the, had mathematically and psychologically broken the German defense before the conventional battle even began. The failure to stop the invasion was not a failure of men, but a failure of. Today, the beaches stand as a monument not just to the courage of but to the ruins of the German concrete casemates remain, some still showing the scorch marks from the flamethrowers and the massive impact points from the mortars. They serve as permanent testimony to the moment when transformed the nature of amphibious warfare. The specialized tanks, the flails, fascines, and crocodiles, were ultimately just tools. But they were tools born from a desperate need to avoid a catastrophe and wielded by an industrial power capable of producing them at scale. They represent the lesson of his enduring, against a determined enemy entrenched behind seemingly unassailable defenses. The only guaranteed path to success is to. That did not just overwhelm them with numbers, they, creating a set of circumstances where the ultimate sacrifice was minimized by technological innovation. The also permanently altered strategic intelligence doctrine. It became the model for subsequent deception operations and highlighted the critical necessity of. Modern military planners now operate under the explicit understanding that information warfare is as critical as firepower. The experience demonstrated that the High Command's decision-making process is the ultimate priority target. They made rational decisions when faced with a technology that rendered their fortifications into death traps. Their careful preparation, based on, proved. They saved thousands of lives by avoiding the casualties that a conventional, obstacle-by-obstacle frontal assault would have required. They also inflicted a form of defeat that permanently altered the military's view of technological power. This duality, salvation for one side, horror and paralysis for the other, defines the legacy of the Hobart's circus. Military historians recognize the specialized tanks and the deception campaign as decisive innovations that dramatically reduced the projected casualty count and fundamentally. The invasion proved the fundamental truth of industrial age warfare. The defenders discovered that courage could not stop liquid fire, that determination meant nothing when specialized chains could simply sweep aside 10 million mines, and that their defensive strategy was useless when their entire high command was paralyzed by a. The transformation of defense was complete, from faith in fixed fortifications to the recognition that technology could negate any positional advantage. The final arithmetic of modern war was clear: industrial capacity multiplied by technological innovation equals victory, regardless of the human courage on the other side of the equation. They landed successfully because the of steel used to construct the tanks, coupled with the had mathematically and psychologically broken the German defense before the conventional battle even began. The failure to stop the invasion was not a failure of men, but a failure of. Today, the beaches stand as a monument not just to the courage of but to the ruins of the German concrete casemates remain, some still showing the scorch marks from the flamethrowers and the massive impact points from the mortars. They serve as permanent testimony to the moment when transformed the nature of amphibious warfare. The specialized tanks, the flails, fascines, and crocodiles, were ultimately just tools. But they were tools born from a desperate need to avoid a catastrophe and wielded by an industrial power capable of producing them at scale. They represent the lesson of his enduring, against a determined enemy entrenched behind seemingly unassailable defenses. The only guaranteed path to success is to. That did not just overwhelm them with numbers, they, creating a set of circumstances where the ultimate sacrifice was minimized by technological innovation. The beachhead was secured, but the war was far from over. If you want to know how the same that broke the western seawall was then used to wage a brutal, months-long siege in then make sure you hit that subscribe button. In our next video, we'll dive into the forgotten story of the iron fist the tiny, armored that navigated the narrow bocage to call and devastating fire, and how they became the. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching. The German defensive strategy, devised by Field Marshal Rommel, was rigid. This doctrine mandated a rapid, powerful counterattack by armored reserves within the first 2 hours. The failure to stop the Allied troops was rooted in the systemic failure to execute this necessary counterattack. This failure was a direct, manufactured outcome of the Allied Operation /Monarch /Deception. The deception created a for the German High Command. They possessed formidable armored divisions, and several elite divisions, perfectly positioned to strike the invasion flanks. However, these divisions were held of the actual landing sites, waiting for the main event at. Intelligence intercepts from revealed a furious, but ultimately futile, internal debate. The commanders on the ground in Normandy, witnessing the devastating success of the AVRE and Crocodile tanks, screamed for immediate armored relief. Their reports, however, were contradicted by the in-radio traffic surrounding the command structure itself exacerbated the paralysis. Critical decisions regarding the movement of strategic reserves required direct authorization from the highest levels, which were convinced the Normandy landings were merely a feint. This centralization of command, intended to ensure decisive action, became an. The German had designed its logistics and command structure to be robust against conventional attack, but it was. By the time the reality of the situation sunk in, the was slammed shut. The Allied had expanded their beachhead, poured in logistical support, and were pushing inland. The German armored reserves, when finally committed, were forced to make a long, exposed march south, where they were savaged by. The failure to stop the invasion was not a lack of tanks, but a failure of orchestrated by the broke the outer shell, but Operation /Monarch /Shattered /the /German /will /to /fight /back. This duality defined the triumph. The 156,000 Allied troops that surged ashore on D-Day were not just an overwhelming force, they were the beneficiaries of a calculated asymmetry in industrial and technological might. This victory was the ultimate proof that modern warfare operates on an unforgiving arithmetic: industrial capacity multiplied by technological innovation equals victory, regardless of the human courage on the opposing side of the equation. The German defenders, fighting with immense bravery and determination, discovered that their courage could not stop the liquid fire of the Crocodile flamethrowers, nor could their fortified positions withstand the systematic, mechanical demolition of the AVRE tanks. Their years of preparation to create the western seawall were rendered utterly worthless by a specialized toolkit that literally erased their defenses. Furthermore, the simultaneous success of Operation Monarch, the Ghost Army deception, ensured that the necessary German armored response was held captive by false intelligence. The German High Command's fatal error was trusting a phantom threat over the desperate reality reported from the beaches, thus ensuring the critical window for counterattack was missed. The German failure to stop the invasion was not a failure of men, but a failure of engineering and strategic intelligence. Today, the beaches of Normandy, the sites of this colossal struggle, stand as a monument not just to the sacrifices made, but to the enduring legacy of military ingenuity. The ruins of the German concrete casemates remain, some still displaying the scorch marks from the Crocodile tanks and the impact points from the petard mortars. They serve as permanent testimony to the moment when mechanized demolition and strategic paralysis transformed the very nature of amphibious assault. The D-Day invasion demonstrated that the path to victory lies in changing the equation when faced with an entrenched foe. The AVREs and Crocodiles saved thousands of Allied lives by avoiding the catastrophic casualties that a conventional, obstacle-by-obstacle frontal assault would have required. They were the keys to the German fortress, proving that technological superiority can overcome human courage and determination when the disparity becomes overwhelming. The Allied victory was secured because the 35,000 tons of specialized steel used to construct the AVREs was a more decisive factor than the entire German coastal garrison. The Germans built a wall, the Allies built the tools to unlock it. The success of the D-Day invasion, secured by the 156,000 Allied troops and their technological edge, produced profound unintended consequences that rippled through the rest of the European conflict. The first was the $\math \text over \text reliance \text on \text mechanized \text solutions and subsequent operations. Having witnessed the incredible casualty reduction achieved by the AVRE and Crocodile tanks on the beaches, Allied commanders developed a powerful preference for specialized engineering solutions over conventional infantry assaults. This was entirely rational, but it led to delays and logistical bottlenecks when the battle shifted from the clear beaches to the intricate, close-quarters combat of the bocage country in urban areas. The specialized Churchill chassis, while excellent for breaching, was slow and resource-intensive, complicating the rapid pursuit phase of the battle. The second unintended consequence was the immediate and drastic reallocation of German resources. Faced with the undeniable evidence that their western seawall was useless, German High Command desperately began pouring resources into two parallel defensive efforts: anti-tank measures and anti-air defenses. The priority shifted from fixed fortifications to mobile, layered defense in depth, relying on terrain and decentralized command, lessons learned too late from the D-Day paralysis. The development and deployment of new Panzerfaust variants and advanced anti-aircraft weaponry accelerated dramatically in the summer of 1944 directly because of the shock of the D-Day technological breach and the subsequent air attacks on the Panzer reserves. The Allies' very success forced the enemy to adapt and innovate in ways that made later fighting, particularly during the Battle of the Bulge, even more fierce and bloody. Furthermore, the psychological trauma experienced by the German defenders, documented by chaplains and in POW interrogations, created a deep, lasting rift in their fighting spirit. While elite Waffen-SS units would continue to fight fanatically, the bulk of the Wehrmacht's regular infantry was now fighting with the terrifying knowledge that their best efforts at defense could be erased in minutes by unseen Allied machinery. This collapse of faith in fixed defense was an immense strategic victory for the Allies, but it created an enemy that was, in some sectors, both defeated and unpredictably desperate. The victory was assured, but the cost, measured in the ensuing months of fighting, was a direct result of the initial technological and strategic shock delivered on D-Day. The combined technological innovations of D-Day did more than win a battle, they permanently ushered in an era of three-dimensional warfare. For the German defenders, combat had become a simultaneous threat: horizontal, from the naval and conventional armored assault; vertical, from the unchallenged Allied air power; and subsurface, from the demolition and fire flowing into their subterranean fortifications. The concept of subsurface neutralization, pioneered by the AVREs and crocodiles, proved particularly devastating. While the Iwo Jima fight, as detailed in the inspirational video, focused on destroying deep cave systems, the D-Day threat was against shallow, hardened positions and trenches. The crocodile's ability to project fire into the small ventilation shafts and apertures of pillboxes, consuming oxygen and creating a thermal overpressure, transformed the very geometry of defense. No longer could a soldier feel safe simply by hunkering down behind 4 feet of concrete. Admiral Bertram Ramsay, commander of the Allied Naval Expeditionary Force, later noted that the greatest naval contribution was not just the transport, but the coordination of the naval bombardment with the mechanized breach. As the specialized tanks moved forward, the naval guns provided suppression, effectively sandwiching the German defenders between overwhelming firepower from the sea and the systematic destruction from the land. This layered annihilation was impossible to counter. The fusion of engineering risk mitigation, the AVREs, information dominance, Operation Monarch, and air supremacy defined the new military paradigm. The successful landing and subsequent unbroken lodgment of the 156,000 troops demonstrated that modern war requires mastery of all 3 dimensions simultaneously. The Germans had planned for a 2-dimensional fight on the sand; the Allies delivered a 3-dimensional shockwave that proved unstoppable. This strategic lesson remains the core of modern combined arms doctrine, showing that integrated technological superiority is the ultimate force multiplier. The 156,000 Allied troops that successfully established the beachhead on D-Day achieved one of the greatest military feats in history, not by luck, but through calculated asymmetry. They leveraged specialized technology that the Germans had never conceived of: the AVRE vehicles that turned insurmountable obstacles into cleared pathways, and the crocodile tanks that rendered concrete bunkers into fiery coffins. Crucially, they paired this physical dominance with psychological paralysis delivered by the Ghost Army deception, Operation Monarch. The German defenders' failure was the inability to adapt to the speed of Allied innovation. Their command was fighting a phantom war 200 miles north, while their soldiers on the beach were overwhelmed by mechanical monsters. In the end, the defense of the western seawall was not defeated by a shortage of courage, but by a shortage of specialized steel and a failure of intelligence. The story of D-Day is the ultimate proof that in modern warfare, the victory often goes to the side that not only fights harder, but engineers smarter. The ingenuity of the Hobart's /Circus saved countless Allied lives and provided the critical breakthrough that allowed the largest invasion in history to succeed. The Germans built a wall, the Allies built the tools to unlock it. The final arithmetic remains: the Allied victory was secured because the 35,000 tons of specialized steel used to construct the AVREs was a more decisive factor than the entire German coastal garrison. The transformation was complete. Technological superiority is the ultimate force multiplier. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification /bell so you don't miss any upload from us. The 156,000 Allied troops that successfully established the beachhead on D-Day achieved one of the greatest military feats in history, not by luck, but through calculated asymmetry. They leveraged specialized technology that the Germans had never conceived of, the AVRE vehicles that turned insurmountable obstacles into cleared pathways, and the crocodile tanks that rendered concrete bunkers into fiery coffins. Crucially, they paired this physical dominance with psychological paralysis delivered by the Ghost Army deception, Operation Monarch. The German defenders' failure was the inability to adapt to the speed of Allied innovation. Their command was fighting a phantom war 200 miles north, while their soldiers on the beach were overwhelmed by mechanical monsters. In the end, the defense of the western seawall was not defeated by a shortage of courage, but by a shortage of specialized steel and a failure of intelligence. The story of D-Day is the ultimate proof that in modern warfare, the victory often goes to the side that not only fights harder, but engineers smarter. The ingenuity of the Hobart's /Circus saved countless Allied lives and provided the critical breakthrough that allowed the largest invasion in history to succeed. The Germans built a wall, the Allies built the tools to unlock it. The final arithmetic remains: the Allied victory was secured because the 35,000 tons of specialized steel used to construct the AVREs was a more decisive factor than the entire German coastal garrison. The transformation was complete. Technological superiority is the ultimate force multiplier. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification /bell so you don't miss any upload from us.